Hello, hello, and welcome to Keep It Colorful. If you're interested in learning acrylic painting fundamentals in bite-sized projects, you're in the right place. I do new tutorials every single weekend, and today, in this acrylic painting tutorial, we're going to drift away into this coastal dream. This piece, which I called Coastal Hydrangeas, uses a palette of very soft blues and periwinkles, some muted greens, and we're going to capture this very Cape Cod style aesthetic, reminiscent of the Azores in Portugal, where blue hydrangeas actually grow wild. Now, the first place I ever saw these flowers was in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts, so it will always remind me of there where my mom lives. For today's class, I'm going to show you how to block in very soft atmospheric perspective. And that's where there's some elements that look like they're farther away. And we're going to do that using temperature and value shifts. And we'll really explore dry brushing techniques and perspective to really get water reflections as well. So this beautiful reflections of those white sailboats on the water. You're going to build brush confidence with the bold and loose strokes to create these large clusters of hydrangea blossoms. And we're going to work with light colors over dark colors, which is a technique that old master painters used to really create volume in these fun, floofy shapes. This class will be free for an entire week. If you would like to keep it forever and ever, you can tip to own it at 50% off, which is just a few bucks. And that will give you lifetime access to your favorite classes. Everything on my website is between $5 and $15. I love keeping detailed instruction very affordable. And of course, I have plenty of free classes for you to enjoy as well. Now, if you are one of our Kick Academy subscribers, this class is now part of your library, so you can paint it at any time. Kick Academy members get unlimited access to over 560 detailed tutorials. We'll cover everything from landscapes to animals, seasonal themes, palette knife painting, and more. When you're finished your painting today, don't forget you can share your artwork in our private Facebook sharing group. I love seeing what you create, and I do look at everyone's painting. I'm in the group all of the time. Feel free to ask me questions there if you would like. We all support each other in our group. It's a wonderful community to belong to, and of course I post upcoming classes in there as well. All right, let's go over supplies and let's launch right in to today's class. Now, I'm sorry I was a little bit late. I was pouring out this palette here. I'm at the very end of my white paint. So if you know the struggle is real, it gets right into the end of the bottle. You got to do the tap or scoop. All right, so let's go over these paint colors. This is a blue palette, so please, you don't have to use the colors that I used. Use whatever blues and purples you have at home. But I am going to show you the exact colors I use just in case you're really interested in a color and want to know what it is. I'm going to come around the colors from the top here. So here we have ultramarine blue. We have phthalo blue, or phthalocyanine blue is the full name. Turquoise blue. And a tiny little bit of bright aqua green. If you don't have the bright aqua green, that's fine. I did use it for just a few highlights in there. We've got some purple here. This is Prism Violet and Quinacridone Magenta. I don't know if you can see from far away, but these hydrangeas are actually really full of color, and even individual strokes have multiple colors in them. There's no drawing in today's class. It's really just very expressive and free form of painting. So Prism Violet, Quinacridone Magenta. I have a little bit of cadmium yellow medium hue for creating vibrant greens in this painting and for mixing a little brown in the distant land. I have two greens today, a cool green and a warm green. For the cool green here, I have Green Deep Permanent, and I have Hooker's Green for a warm green, and a little bit of Burnt Umber Brown. Other than that, I just have several dollops of white. We have a lot of tints here. A tint is anytime you add color to white to make a more lighter pastel version. So I have, you know, almost a blob of white for each color on here, almost. You can pour that as you go. I like having it all ready to roll. Once you've got your paints, you're going to need something to paint on. It's been a while since we did a landscape orientation of the canvas. Landscape is when it's this way. If someone talks about a portrait orientation, that's just turning the canvas up like this. But I wanted to do a landscape style to get that sweeping view. This size is 11 by 14 inches. 11 by 14 inches. But please feel free to use any size you like, any shape. Square, circular, on a canvas bag. The sky is the limits. You can do this big or small. You can make your sailboats bigger or smaller. Same with your hydrangeas. This is very open to adaptation and interpretation. Paints, canvas, you're also going to need a few brushes for today. Again, just a minimal amount of brushes. Let's go over those. I'll hold them up close so you can approximate the size and bristle shape. And we'll just kind of compare it to my average size thumb. We're going to use a number 12 flat brush. This is about 3/4 inch wide. A number 8 Filbert. Nice thumb-sized brush with the round tip, perfect for floofy clouds. Grab a number 6 bright brush. This poor brush is clean, but it's stained. It doesn't have an intact tip, but that's okay because today I'm going to use this number 6 bright brush for blocking in these hydrangeas. So just dabbing today. So if you have an old scrubby bright brush, it's perfect. A little number 0 round brush for any tiny details we might have. And then a few fan brushes. I like having a bristly textured fan. This is actually an oil painting brush. It's really fabulous for scrubbing in color. And I also have my second favorite fan brush, this little miniature size fan. This is an acrylic fan. That means it's typically made out of nylon or Taclon for the bristle material, and it's not as scraggly as those oil painting brushes. And look how small this is. This is a size 10.0 acrylic fan brush by Artist Loft, and I just love these. If you have a mop brush, big or small, this is nice for softening in areas of color, and I've used this a few times in the painting just to brush out some of these horizontal streaks into the water, and you can use it to help blend in some of the clouds in the sky as well. That's it for brushes. A few more supplies you might want to have handy dandy are a paper towel for cleaning off your brushes and drying them. And of course, water is how we wash our acrylic brushes, and you never want to let them dry out, so always have a big jar of water. If you're new to acrylic painting, I want you to know that you can also use water to thin your paints to a thin consistency. So always have a jar close by. Two more things that I use as tools. When we want to have a layer of paint dry faster, it can be nice to have a blow dryer. I don't use like a nice one for hair. I just use this tiny little travel size blow dryer. And acrylic paints do dry fast, but sometimes it takes 15 minutes. This will make it just a few seconds. Now, acrylic paints can dry out much faster than we want them to on the palette. And you can use a wet palette, which kind of keeps the paints wet from the bottom. But I like recycling glass palettes because I never have to buy palette paper. It's firm, so great for when I use my palette knife. And you can use the same palette for like your whole life. I do store my paints in a wet palette overnight, but when I'm painting, and sometimes I'm painting outside, I like glass. And this will keep your paints wet by just lightly misting the top. As soon as you notice they're getting a bit sticky or dry, approximately every 15 minutes, I just go, this is an automatic spray bottle for my little arthritic hands, but a light misting with a spray bottle will keep them wet for hours. All right, that's it for supplies, you guys. Let's go ahead and launch into step one. We are going to build from background to foreground, which means we are going to start building layers into our sky and water. Then we'll do some clouds, the land masses, of course, because some of our sailboats pop over the land before heading into the bottom into those hydrangeas. So get ready for a nice, relaxing paint. Grab a nice bright brush for mixing and let's get into this. I like mixing my colors with a bright brush. You see we have a variety of blues here in our, in our sky and water. So I have all my blues lined up here, and I want to make nice tints of them. The sky is very light. The sky is very light. So I'm going to take the smallest amount of ultramarine blue, like this, small little bit. And I'm going to mix it into this entire dollop of white. That's like 5 or 6 times the white to the blue, and I want a nice pastel color. I like starting with a bit of a lighter color, because if I want a darker color, I can just take some of the lighter color, add a bit more ultramarine to get kind of an in-between blue. And what a beautiful blue this is. So, here's the darker kind of ultramarine blue color. Beautiful purpley blue, perfect for hydrangeas. And then here's the ultramarine blue with lots of white in it. And this is a beautiful sky blue color. Now, the sky can change all the time, but I often see it this more kind of misty, muted, warm, purpley blue. Now, rinse your brush. The phthalo blue has a really intense tinting strength, which means you need even less of it to get a pastel color. Okay. So I want you to really just the tip into that phthalo blue, like this, just the tiniest bit. And let's dip that into this blob of white. I have basically like a large tablespoon of white. All right, and look at this blue. This is the pastel version. They look so similar when they're dark, don't they? But once we add that white, we can really see the underlying hue. This is a robin's egg blue. Beautiful, beautiful. More teal, kind of greenish blue. And I might take a little scoop of that, add a little more phthalo blue to make kind of a bit of a darker phthalo blue. And look at these two blues. More of a periwinkle blue, more of a teal blue. The turquoise blue is very similar to the phthalo blue, but you'll see it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more green. And sometimes I find it easier than trying to add the perfect amount of, you can add green or yellow to phthalo blue to make turquoise blue or bright aqua green, but it can be a bit finicky. So when I'm using a lot of the color, I don't mind getting the pre-mixed one. All right, so let's take some white, and I'm going to do the same. Going to add I might take a slightly greater amount of this blue, like a nice scoop like this, into the white. And it's going to get, see, very similar to the ultramarine, but more, or not the ultramarine, the phthalo, but more greenish. More greenish. Let's do the same thing. Let's make a light version and a little bit of a darker version. So here's the darker turquoise blue. I'll put it right next to the phthalo so you can see the difference more clearly. It's more green. And you can really see it in the light version here compared to the light phthalo. And lastly, let's take a tiny little bit of white and add some bright aqua green. This is basically turquoise blue with more green in it or more yellow in it, however you want to think about it. And look at that beautiful bounty of blues. Okie dokie. Brings out that little square. And we're just going to start with a solid color into the sky. And the sky comes down about 1/3 of the way. So if I were to cut this into thirds, kind of like a flag, you see the sky is about 1/3, the water is about 1/3, and the hydrangeas take up about 1/3. And I'll give or take a juicy dollop or two. So let's take that bright brush. Let's go into some of our light ultramarine color, maybe even a little bit in between. And I'm going to come about 1/3 of the way. I know what you're thinking. This blue looks more like this blue, but I started it with a layer of this, and I'll show you why. So once you've got that on, dip a bigger brush into some water, like a flat brush, and let's grab a nice scoop of the blue. Come across. You can just go right into some white to mix it on here too. Like if you run out of color, just grab some white and you can use a bit of your darker color on top. And I like to wrap some of this around the bottom. People often think I add medium to my paint to blend it for longer, but I actually just use a juicy amount of paint. You can see how much paint I have here. It's a sticky, juicy layer. We'd have a fairly heavy rainstorm going on where I live in Cape Breton, and it's also warm and summery, so very peaceful. All right. So just get a nice juicy coat on there like that. And then we're going to leave it. You can brush side to side. Warm up that arm. Get it around the edges. Relax. Take your time. All right. And we're going to allow this to dry. And while it's drying, we're going to get into this blue and this blue to start filling in our water. I might grab a brush like my little Filbert brush here. And I'm going to use a bit of the darker phthalo blue plus white. That's this one. Right at the top, and maybe even overlap a little bit, making this a bit of a smaller third since there's a taller landmass back there. And this little bit comes down. So got a little bit of the phthalo blue on there. And then we kind of have to pick our opening for the hydrangeas. Again, remember, it's about 1/3 like this, but it's not perfectly even. So maybe we have it kind of coming down like this and then up a little bit on the other side. We're just going to create a little opening there. And then let's continue on with some of our phthalo blue. Maybe using a bit of the lighter phthalo blue towards the bottom. And for now, I want you to keep your streaking relatively horizontal. A little darker at the top. And that's just because water often gets darker the further away it is, or appears darker to our eyes. Now you can mix right on here. If you want it lighter down below and it's too dark, you can grab even just a little white and, you know, kind of swirl it in there. Because once I've got a bit of a juicy base coat, I do like incorporating some other colors in here. Even a little bit of, I'm going to rinse my brush, at least lightly, and maybe get a little bit more of this, a lighter ultramarine blue, because the sky reflects in the water too. And just, let's create some little streaky deakies in here. Maybe a bit of a darker ultramarine streaking up in here. And you can use a bright brush for this too. Let's get some of that lighter turquoise blue in there if you haven't already. Even a little bit of that bright aqua green. So I love having a big old juicy coat on to start. Like the sky, there's 2 layers into the water, just 2. I may even, there's a lot of paint down there, so I'm kind of grabbing a pretty big dollop of paint, and I'm even just doing a few pretty thick light streaks of white. When the paint's this wet, it has a tendency to all just smoosh together. But let's do a little something like this, or whatever your favorite blues are. Like the sky, I didn't really realize just how drastically different the color of water could look until I moved closer to the ocean. And I was like, sometimes it looks almost black. Right now, it is the lightest gray and it almost disappears into the sky. Picks up warm tints at the sunset. It's sometimes it's almost green. Sometimes it's a deep navy blue. Really beautiful. You can see through the water to the bottom if it's a clear day, which affects the color. If it's still, it reflects more of the sky. If it's wavy, the underbellies of the waves can look super dark. I'm going to buff this out a little bit with my mop brush. If you do not have a mop brush, just use that big old flat brush or any nice soft brush like your Filbert, okay? And I'm just going to go side to side for now. We'll get the vertical striations in a bit more detail in layer 2. So here we go. I'm just going to lightly buff. I'm going to start up in the dark color. Maybe just drag one way for now. All right. I don't want to lose all my variants, but I'm going to soften it just a little bit. Like this. Again, no mop brush, just use your big flat. As your paint dries, you're going to notice it starts to feel kind of sticky. it starts to feel really sticky or is starting to pull up in a way that doesn't look good, then we just stop and then we come back to it layer 2. Now that can be hard because we think of fixing a problem with paint as getting in there and brushing it more, but a lot of the times our job is to wait and watch that paint dry. All right, I don't know about you, but I just have so much fun blending the paint, and I blend it too much and then I'll lose all my stripes and then I come back in with more. At some point we're gonna have to stop and leave it alone. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna leave this now, and like I said, we're having a rainstorm, so the humidity in the air is making my paints dry slower than they normally would. I'm gonna spritz my paints now with a tiny bit of water. And then I'm going to give this a blast with the blow dryer so we can get up into those soft, fluffy clouds. This method for clouds is really easy to do. We're going to use a bit of negative space, like not painting the actual cloud, but adding a bit of a darker layer on top, a light purple layer on the bottom, and then the clouds will blend in really beautifully. So if you're ready and you have a blow dryer, let's go ahead and give this a blast. I'm going to turn this bad boy on hot and on high. You won't hear it, but trust me, it's on. Okie dokie. Let's get on up into these clouds. We're going to mix an in-between color. I add a little tiny bit of phthalo blue, the light phthalo blue, to the light ultramarine blue to get this color, which you can see when I hold them side by side. This is this ultramarine color here, but with a little bit of the teal color in it. It makes it a really beautiful, almost like a cerulean blue, which I love. Okay, so I need to mix some more of that light ultramarine. And I'm going to just mix them together right here. This is kind of like an in-between color. So we do a little color swatch here. I'm going to put it right underneath this blue. So we can see it's a little bit more teal than the ultramarine. And I like that. Our own custom blue. We can lighten it a bit if we like. So here we can compare. It's not quite as teal as this, not quite as warm as this. It's a really nice kind of neutral blue color. All right. So let's take some of our homemade blue, and we kind of have the clouds. I'm going to create a little bit of an edge for these clouds and kind of think about drawing the outline, like one's kind of low and then bumps up here. Then it gets low and then bumps up here. And there's another one here that bumps up. So it's kind of low, then bumps up. This doesn't have to be precise or anything. And it kind of bumps up over here. And then we might have another little one that kind of comes like this, right there. So I'm just gonna do another wet coat of this. I'm using my Filbert. I'm gonna wrap this around the edge. And it's okay if little bits of the underpainting shows through. Get a nice juicy coat. This is so that we can blend the clouds in and tweak the color a little, but having that nice, beautiful periwinkle shining through in spots where you haven't covered it all, right? It's gonna peek through and give some nice depth to this sky. All right, so next up, let's do another color here with our bright brush. We're gonna mix our first true kind of really pastel periwinkle color. So let's take some white. And I don't know about you, but I need to mix a bit more of my pale ultramarine color. I've just remixed some of this color. I want it to be even more pastel. Like really, really pastel ultramarine. And then let's go the tiniest tip into some birds. Into some prism violet right here. And let's add it. I'll just give it a little bit of a purplish hue. So it's just this kind of bit of purple in there. I'm going to hold it up close to so here's the ultramarine blue. This one is a little bit lighter and it has the tiniest bit of purple in there. Okay. Can maybe even make it a little lighter. There we go. So very close to this color, just a little more purple. And we're just going to pull this along the bottom. And we want to do it before the whole top dries. And this should look lighter than the first ultramarine color that we had on there. I'm just going to take a little water on my clean brush to keep that edge a little soft. There we go. And let's bring this purple up a little higher. and even switch to our Filbert. I'm going to rinse out my little Filbert. That's this one here, you guys, with the round tip. And I'm going to bring a little bit more of this up. In towards where my clouds might be. And then rinse off your brush one more time. We got to get into the wet or the white before this fully dries. I'm going to go into some pure white, and the light is coming down this way. Okay, from the upper right to the lower left. You can tell because the highlight is on the side where the light would be coming down this way, which means the highlights on the cloud are on that side too. So let's take our brush into a decent amount of white, and you can use a firm pressure here, okay? And really scrub it in and let the colors merge and do their thing. You can lightly scumble too, which is kind of letting the brush kind of dance across the top to create these little mini patterns. So we have like this basic shape of the cloud where it comes up and then kind of down. But you can let the brush kind of dance around and make some random marks as well. Go back into the white. Let's have another one over here. I kind of like to do little half C shapes like this to highlight the tops, the brightest parts. If your paint's drying, wet your brush a little bit and then scrub into that blue, okay? And then I'm going to blend out what I've got into the side. Maybe going in for one more little cloud, like right here. And just letting it taper off. Streak a little bit of that white a bit more flat into the bottom. The more random your brush strokes can be, the more cloud-like this will look like. I wanted to have a bit more of the purple in the bottom of the sky to help round out the purples down here. I like the way that looks. And those random marks to help loosen things up. And I like to do one final pass in the bright white, maybe just on this side the light's facing. A couple little kind of half C shapes. And then I wipe it right off the brush, and they look okay from afar, but up close it just looks like a big old stroke, and I want it to be a bit softer. So I use the whole side of my brush and gently just kind of tickle that in. Even just light pressure. Pressure is important for techniques. If you want to take away some color, if your blue's still wet, you can just touch the blue and the brush picks up the blue. So I could just push hard into the blue and bring it down to shorten a cloud. It's nice to have one shorter and one taller. If it's dry, grab a bit more blue, but you can try the push technique too. Make sure the purple doesn't look too stripy, like you can bring it up a little bit in some spots too. All right. You can even dab this on with a sponge if you don't like the brush technique, but we do sponging clouds in other classes, so I thought this would be kind of fun. The sky is most always lighter than the water. Not always, but it quite often is, especially on a nice clear day like this. So we have our sky and we have our water. The next thing we're going to do is pull in these really impressionistic style distant hills. Okay. So this one has a bit more contrast. This one's a little bit more blue and pushed back. We can accentuate that even more. And what this means visually is we're trying to create what's called atmospheric perspective, or the illusion of distance. So this shape is bigger, and bigger sometimes can illustrate the fact that something is closer to us, but not always. If you have a huge mountain and then a smaller one in front, it will be the opposite. So size a little bit indicates distance, but what does even more is detail and contrast. So this hill has more lights and more darks. There's these really dark purples in here, whereas the color back here is a little bit more blue. I added less of the warm green and brown, and it's a little bit less contrast and just a little bit softer in general. So this has more detail and more contrast. We could make this look even like mistier and further if we use blues that were closer to the sky color. So let's play with that in these hills to create that illusion of distance. So let's go ahead and rinse out our bright brushes. So your bright brush. And we're going to mix a few more colors now. We're going to use some of these same blues, but we're also going to incorporate some greens and some browns. So take a little bit of your green deep permanent and let's take a little bit of some phthalo blue with white in it. I'm going for this darker, not phthalo, I'm so sorry. This is ultramarine. Please grab some of your ultramarine blue, a little bit of white in it, and let's do equal parts. We should get kind of a dusty blue-green. A little something like this. Kind of a dusty tealy, like a muted teal, not a bright teal like this, is it? It's kind of like a muted teal, and you can really see the color a bit better if I add a tiny little bit of water here so I can kind of show you the color as it lightens. So it's kind of a dirty teal. The other color I like to make involves making a bit of a warmer brown. So let's take 2 scoops of yellow and mix 1 scoop of prism violet. And this is going to make a really beautiful sepia color. You have to use prism violet and not dioxazine purple, or you can use raw sienna, which is the color that we've just mixed here. Okay, our raw sienna color. And we're going to mix a scoop of our raw sienna with a scoop of our hooker's green. Maybe a bit more yellow. So this is going to create kind of a warm olivey green. And it's quite dark here, this warm olivey green. We're going to add a little bit of white to some of this so you can really see the hue of this color. So this is color with some white. So a dusty teal, some of this warm green. Okay. Now I want to start with taking some of this phthalo green ultramarine blue mixture, and I want to add a little bit of white to it so it's even lighter. So some phthalo blue, some green deep permanent, sorry, and some white so it's even lighter. So that's this turquoise blue, the dusty turquoise blue with white. And you can see when we add white to it, we get a much lighter. So that's with a little white. If we add even more white, you can really see it's kind of a muted teal, which I love. That's this color with a little white and then a lot of white. And if I wanted to make this look even more distant, this is how I would do it. I would take a little bit of this lighter, the lightest one, even to start. As long as it's a little bit darker than the sky color. I'm going to take this bright brush and I'm going to start in the middle and say create a little bit of land, a little hill rising up. A little bit darker maybe. It's blending with the light color of the sky. It's like a little hill. I'm going to go with a slightly darker version of this dusty teal and right along the edge of the water. I'm not coming down over top of it. And I'm going to block out the shape of the land. Don't worry if you muck up the area where the water meets these distant hills. We can clean that up in our next coat and give it a few little bumps and lumps. Okay. But this will keep those hills looking really soft and far away. And we can even take some of our actual ultramarine blue and let's just add a few dollops in there to make it look like it's not just a solid shape. I'm going to add a little bit of my ultramarine, as long as it's darker than the sky, but kind of a medium value color. Maybe a little bit of this warm light green on top, just a little bit. Okay. Now the bigger one is going to sit a little bit into the water, but not very far. I have this one coming over about halfway. You could do a little more or a little less. Now let's start with some of our blue-green mix. That's maybe a little bit darker. Remember, we get more contrast as we come forward in space and we lose contrast as we go further away. So again, this color is green deep permanent plus ultramarine blue. Okay. So this is an even kind of darker mix of this color. If I don't add as much white, I can get a little bit of a darker version of this color. And I'm just going to come into my water just a little bit. And maybe just bring it over to here. So this shape is going to overlap the sky a little bit more, and then it's going to slowly kind of taper down to wherever we want this landmass to end. And let's fill it in. Little pulls and dots and dabs, okay? And let's take a little bit of some of our darker ultramarine blue just to mix it up. Maybe a little bit of this warm green mix right in. I'm using the darker one, and then we'll add some lighter one later on. All right, so see how this bluer colors pushes them farther away, and I actually just darken the tip of this landmass here, so it kind of looks like this one's super close, this one's medium close, and this one is even further away. That's because I kept this one bluer and lighter with less detail. This one has a little bit more detail and is a little more dark, and this one being the darkest and will eventually have the most detail. So you can come in with some light color. Maybe there's little kind of hills in here, houses, or it's a bit easier to get some more color in here once it's dry. I still like to keep that top edge a little bit softer. So maybe some of the kind of sky color, the lighter, I'm just using ultramarine and like this medium and light ultramarine plus white. Kind of starting with the darker color and moving towards some of the lighter ones. Maybe a little bit of that really light warm green. That's this one. It looks super light here, but it's actually this color. Add a bit more yellow in there. There we go. That's nice for a highlight color. Just a little on the top. And I have to put the paint on pretty thick to stop it from blending in too much. All right, I might stop and wait for this to dry before adding any more detail on there. Now let's have your brush Now let's do a little line in this light kind of sandy taupey color to represent, it's like a distant beach off in the distance. Like you could sail on out there and sun yourself in the buff. All right. I'm going to rinse off my bright brush. Actually, going to spritz these paints slightly. Whenever we mix them really into thin puddles, they dry a lot faster, don't they? Okay. A little brown and a little white. Here's my burnt umber brown down here. So I'm going to take a little brown, a little white, and it's a nice color, but I want a little yellow in there too. Just a tiny bit of yellow. A nice kind of light sandy brown. Maybe a little something like this. I like to have a darker version and a lighter version of my colors always, so I can do a base tone and then highlights. So a darker sandy and then a lighter sandy, like this. Start with the darker color. Load just the tip of this brush. I have a bright brush. Okay. Let's drag it along the bottom. You can get thin and thick. You can push harder and then lighter. A nice thick coat. Like almost like you're painting in pastel style with a palette knife. You can leave some of those edges. Look at how thick and juicy that is. By pulling lightly with thick, juicy paint, I can kind of have the paint float on top. If I had a thin amount of paint and pushed hard, it would mix in with the wet color. Maybe extend that out a little bit. Maybe a little bit on this one, but I am going to use thinner paint here, and I'm just going to let whatever's on my brush run out because I want this to look more distant, so just less detail. Okay. Super duper. Once it's dry, we can highlight it. You can try highlighting wet and wet as long as you push lightly, but I'm going to wait till we get a bit more dry here. It'll show up better. All right, you guys, from here, we're going to start wanting to build in a few more little streaky deakies and, of course, some details into our sailboats. So the sailboats didn't start as pure white. I used like any of your light blues. I like to stick with the purple blues because the water's teal. We're going to block these sailboats in blue first, pull down some highlights, and then we'll add the white over top. We do have some sailboats overlapping the distant land. So in order to have those colors muddying up, let's give this a blast with our blow dryer, or you can wait for this layer to dry. Go grab a tea. Now, if you really want to, you could use like a white chalk pencil to roughly sketch on the shape of the sailboat, but I wanted this to be a loosey-goosey, no drawing tutorial, so I'm not gonna do that. But if you wanted to, it was basically like a triangle shape, you know. I'm not gonna block my nail. No drawing today. I made it a rule. I'm gonna keep it. So I'm gonna grab a little 1/4" flat brush like this one here. And I'm gonna use a light blue. I don't care if it's a purpley blue or ultramarine, as long as you can see it show up from the water. And I'm gonna start with a bigger one because they're a little bit easier to see. And I want one right about kind of here, and then I'm gonna have a little one off in the distance. So like these two. So I'm gonna do a really little line to represent the bottom of the boat for now. So here's, say, the width of the boat. I'd even go in for a bit of a darker blue first. Okay. So here's the bottom of the boat. And I might try to gently pull up a little bit. Have it come out on each side a little. And then it's essentially a triangle shape, okay? That kind of comes up like this. And I'm gonna have this one peeking. This is a really big one. Peeking up like this. I don't know sailing terms, but essentially we're gonna have one sail that looks a little bit larger. Like this. Leave a little gap in between. And then this sail is going to appear to be a little bit smaller. It's going to kind of come up to meet that sail, and they terminate kind of right before the bottom of the boat, like this. I did have a little bit of my sand color coming in here, and I actually pushed it down because I didn't want a big lump in behind. This is just the first coat, so that's all good. And if you do have lumps in behind from your land, you can just thicken the sailboat. Nice bit of texture in there. So here's one. This whole painting is very impressionistic. There's one. And then I wanted another little guy pretty close. This one's further in the distance, so I'm gonna have a nice kind of controlled edge. Deb said the mainsail. Thank you. Thank you, boat folks. Mainsail. I remember, one's the port, one's the bow. This big one will be the mainsail. And what's the little sail called? I don't know much about boats, but I do know that when you need thin lines, pinch your brush down a little bit and make sure you've got a clean edge and wipe into your paint instead of dipping in. I've been on a few sailboats locally here. They are really fun. Basically like a camper on the water. I want a little one relatively close to this boat. This one's going to be a little bit less narrow, so start so it's not as long. Let's get a little boat back here, just a little line. You can try to pull out the end of the boats a little bit, but even just a little line is good. And then the mainsail, okay, might come up into this landmass just a little bit, but we're not going to breach into the sky. Be less wide and less tall. But it is, the whole shape of the boat is taller than it is wide. These ones. There's a few sailboats that ride past our house in the summer. And every time, ooh, there's the boat. Look. Never gets old. Okay. So we're going to keep placing the boats. I'm going to do the next big one up here, and then a few small ones that are really off in the distance. So same shape, and we're just going to keep moving along our canvas. You can put these anywhere you like. All right. Should I have another one here? I kind of want to, but then I brought this hydrangea up. I could also have a sailboat here and no hydrangea. Decisions, decisions. I kind of do want a big one here today. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'm going a little bit rogue with my boats here. If we can't trust our intuition enough to try something new, then we're doing it wrong. Eventually, we've got to make a leap and try something. And if it doesn't work out, we can paint over it or keep working it until it looks good in some way. By using these periwinkle colors or the light purples in the underpainting of the sailboat, we give ourselves the opportunity to add highlights in a way that suggests a light source and adds texture. So while I did lighten a lot of the boats, you'll see the colors peeking through, and that can give your painting a little more dimension. Right, this one I'm going to have coming right up into the sky. I want my underpainting color to be a bit darker than whatever sky color I've got on there. These are just lovely little simplified boats. And detail doesn't always mean better. Some of the most charming paintings are more simple. All right, so I have 3 big ones. I want to add a few really little ones, and I'm going to snuggle in close here. So for the little ones, really just a little sail like this. I don't even see the split. Just the little sail, and then these are really far away, so we don't see much detail at all. We could potentially do a mid-size one, just a little bit bigger than these guys. Right here. So have as many little boats as you like. I like to dry the boats just so we don't smudge them. And then we're going to add another layer to the water. Because it's already all covered in blue, think about this layer as just adding a little wet paint so we can blend the highlights down, or adding extra color, shine, depth, and dimension to this layer. So this is lovely blue, but look up close, it is a little bit flat. So if we compare this to how much like color and depth is in this layer of water, you can see how lovely it can be to work up in those layers. And that's what we're going to do now. I do see a comment from Kathy Clark who says, I don't know why, but my paints dry really fast on the palette, even with spraying water on them. So I told my daughter, I think we'll start with the first colors and then add more as we go. And that is great. You can pour the paints out just as you need them. That really depends on how like arid your where you live is. So if it's really hot or dry, or you have the heat or air conditioning on, it will dry them so fast. I love painting outside and they dry really, really fast. And I have to spray them like every 5 minutes instead of every 15. You do have some options, and I want to talk about them now while we're live so that it benefits other painters as well. So number one, make sure the blobs of paint you're pouring are big enough. So the blobs I paint, I don't spread them thin. If you spread them thin with the brush, they dry out fast. Keep your blobs bigger. You'll actually waste less paint because it will dry much more slowly. So keep the blobs bigger. Two, use a wet palette. Here's my wet palette. I actually just stuck my glass. I store paints overnight in my wet palette. So this comes with a lid, and it has a sponge underneath, and then this white palette paper, which is like parchment paper. I keep my paints on the glass. I store them overnight in here. They'll stay wet for like months, even on my glass cutting board, because when the lid is on and the wet sponge is there, it's so humid they can't dry out. It's sealed. However, you can pour your paint right on the palette paper, which absorbs water from the sponge below. This keeps your paints hydrated from beneath. You do have to keep buying the palette paper, but if you're living somewhere where your paint is drying out on you way too fast, then it's worth the investment to get the wet palette, and pour your paints on the paper. One more thing is to add a slow dry medium or retarder right to your paints. So I love using glazing liquid because it's slow drying, which means it has a retarding agent in it. However, this really makes your paints more translucent. So you can actually just get the retarding medium from Golden or Liquitex, which is my favorite brand, and then you only need a few drops, and that allows your paints to dry really slowly. My fourth tip is to buy paints called Golden Open. These have the retarding agent built right in. The paints are thick, buttery, creamy, and artist quality. They are so nice. They're my favorite paints, and I love using them. So just to recap, pour more paint because bigger blobs dry slower than smaller blobs. Number two, you can use a wet palette to help keep your paints wet from below. Number three is you can add a retarding agent to your paint to help them dry slower. Number four, buy Golden Open paint, which has a slow dry time baked right into them. One of those four things will help you. Acrylics do dry fast, so paint fast and loose. It'll help loosen you up as well. Okay, so here we go. My hubby brought me a green tea with some ginger in it. Nothing as soothing as ginger tea on a rainy day. Painting sailboats. We're going to use the same colors. Let's grab our bright brush, and I'm going to start with a few of the darker colors. Ultramarine plus phthalo. turquoise blue, just something in the more, one of the darker colors. I don't care which one it is. You can even mix them all together for a custom blue. And the boat is going to have both a shadow and a reflection because it's on water. So I like adding a bit of a darkness under the boats. Now we do this with the boat underpainting, because if we did this after we made them white and we accidentally went over, it would be a huge pain in the butt. I'm going to wiggle a few more of these in, because if we just have stripes under the boats, it's going to look funny. Some of the waves might have gentle ripples. I might really darken under this landmass, because this landmass would also reflect in the water. And just wiggle right up to those sailboats, okay? You know, maybe if we want a bit of a shadow under this landmass, it's all good. Maybe just a little less dark. Okay, and then let's do some little ripples in here. Once you've got some darks in there, let's take some lighter, kind of medium colors and pull it through the ripples. Use a nice juicy amount of paint for me. Even some of this bright aqua green in there. Try starting with a color that's just a shade lighter or darker than what's in behind it. You can wiggle up close to those sailboats. And if you accidentally go over, it's not the end of the world. Even a little bit of the ultramarine blue color in here. Okay, so we have another kind of juicy coat. And I want to blend in these kind of darker ripples a little bit now that we've got kind of medium tones everywhere. So let's just work on softening in these shadows, just like we did in coat 1. But now we've got some layers from our first coat there, some layers from this coat, and now that our sailboats are in place, we can build up that little kind of shadow right underneath them, but soften it in to the wet color below. So they don't just look stripy. Oh, green. Unwanted green. I don't mind green in the water, but the warm yellow green makes it mucky. I like having some of these darks in here because once we've got those darks on, we're going to pull some whites in horizontally as well. I've had one of the worst things that could happen to an artist. I ran out of white. I'm on my very last tube. And it's at the sad, blobby endpoint. All right. So now let's go ahead and add some white in while this is still wet or damp. And let's pull some horizontal white streaks in, kind of under the sailboats especially. These can kind of blend around too, but I want to start building a few kind of right under the boats. and about the width of the boats. I might use my bristly fan to keep these a little bit softer. We don't want it to look like stripes. We still want it to look like soft reflections on gently rippling water. If your paints are drying, dampen the brush, tap it off on the napkin so it's just damp, and just start by pulling these side to side. The water should start to have the appearance, because all this is below the sailboats, that it's a little bit lighter in the foreground. So just softening in these ripples a little bit, like this. Now our paints are probably starting to dry in here. They're still wet, but they're not super wet. So it's the perfect time now to come back in under the sailboats. This time, we're going to use the same areas of white, okay? But this time, we're going to do some little streaks that are just the width of the sailboat. I'm using my mini fan, just the tip of it, okay? Like this. Getting in some little streaky deekies right under the boats. Oh. And then wipe all the white off your mini fan. And let's start with a gentle pressure, and let's just pull down. Now I can use this brush and kind of pull through, and when I come through, it's going to create kind of a dark line. But I want to have a bit of that vertical looking reflection coming down. My paints are still a little bit wet. It's a bit drier over here. So see how it's dragging down really nicely over here. I'm going to come over these again when it's a little bit drier, but for now, just going to block a few of them in. You can see just with that little vertical pull, it starts to look really reflective. Make sure you have a few of these other streaky deekies in and around the painting. And let's take a little bit of this bright aqua green, maybe with some even more white in it. So it's a really pale bright aqua green. And wipe your brush off so there's just a little paint on it. And let's create a little reflection along the water here. Maybe some subtle highlights in the back, but make them not perfectly white. So these are just going to be a bit of a lighter blue. Maybe just a few. Now when this dries, it'll be easier to get the vertical pull down without losing all our nice horizontal streaky deekies. So let's just get this nice area in, and I want you to take your time here. There's no rush. Don't worry if you go over your sailboats. We just really wanted to place them to get this highlight and shadow under the boat. Now that we're here, we're going to let this part dry, and we're going to move into the underpainting for the leaves, which is just going to be filling this whole area in with green. Once that's dry, we'll get this down before heading into what I think will be your favorite part, stippling in those hydrangeas. It's loosey-goosey, and you can do it for hours if you want to. We're going to use some of our dark greens to start. So keep playing with that water, but again, we can do one more little tweaky-deaky highlighty layer at the end when we whiten those sailboats. I like to use a nice big brush to start, even this big 12 flat. And let's go right into some of our greens that don't have white. Here's some plain hooker's green. It's a beautiful grassy green. I'll hold that up close in 1 second. And here's some green deep permanent, which is a beautiful dark cool green. And here they are in their plain matte tone without any white in them. If you're not familiar with these colors, I'll show you the undertone. It's got a little water. So here's the hooker's green. So look at it when I thin it with water. You can see it's a beautiful grassy green. And just with a bit of water under the green deep permanent, it's a beautiful bluish green. So again, they don't look too different when they're super dark, but once you add water or white, you can see that undertone. And let's use this color, that big 12 flat brush. And let's just start blocking in some green. I like to start around the edges. You don't have to wrap it around, but we're waiting for stuff to dry anyway. And sometimes if you use a floating frame, which is the most common for paintings, you can see a bit of the edge. A lot of time artists paint on raw canvas that's not been stretched. And they stretch it so that the painting wraps around the edge after they painted it, which can save a lot of space. They only stretch it once their art sells. That was kind of the traditional way. You buy rolls of unstretched canvas and then with my little arthritic hands, I stopped stretching my own canvases quite a few years ago, but it can be really fun to do. You can make any size you want. All right, so we're going to keep with this kind of formation. And just blocking in this layer of green here. Even add a little yellow to some of that hooker's green, which is already grass green. And even though it's dark, it'll lighten the color a little bit. Now, once we get to the water, we do want to start creating some kind of like leafy type edges or varying the edge. So just not one shape, but and kind of pulling in with the leaves, like all eyes and all leaves are pointing towards these boats compositionally, creating a bit of a leading line. Quite a bit of this is going to be covered up by hydrangeas at the edge, but we don't know where, so just have a little bit of a varied texture. Make sure you cover up all the white. What could be the tips of leaves sticking up or folding over. I don't know if anyone out there grows blue hydrangeas, but I have two. One's called Endless Summer. And it's a beautiful hydrangea that is what these are based on. So they will, in my soil type, they actually turn pink and purple, but they color change. So the bulbs change color based on the acidity of the soil. And I have pretty acidic soil where I live, but not acidic enough for these to grow blue. They do in Portugal and the Azores. And then all over New Hampshire, Cape Cod area, Boston, everyone has blue hydrangeas. I think my other one's called, is it Nikki? My other one's newer, but the Endless Summer multicolored. Some of them are just plain periwinkle blue. They're really stunning, and they've got these kind of big, kind of round leaves. I call them medium size. They're not huge like rhubarb leaves, but they got a rounded bottom. They come up to a tip. We've got our greens on here. We've done a few little highlights. Now let's use some of that warm green that we made, maybe adding even a little more yellow. I'm going to take a little bit of this of yellow into some of the hooker's green here, maybe a bit of my orange to make that lighter kind of yellowy green color. Kind of like this one that we made, but a little more yellow. And I'm just going to pull some leafy shapes. Some little highlights in here. Some of the leaves might be pointing up. Some might be pointing down. Even just yellow and white at the tips of some of these. Just yellow and white with a dirty brush to get this. I'm not going to see much of this peek through, so it doesn't have to look particularly leafy. I don't want to spend all that time making perfect leaves only to cover them up, but we want a little bit of variety in there. I like to think we're kind of up on a hill looking down, somewhere where these grow aplenty. All right, Teresa Mayer says Nico Blue. Another blue hydrangea is called Nico Blue. There's quite a few of them, and I love them because they're easy to grow. They can handle soggy soil, and they can handle dry soil. I've got hydrangea trees. Oh my God, I'm so obsessed with hydrangeas. Don't get me started on my hydrangea collection because I will keep talking about it. I have strawberry vanilla, pinky winky, zinfandel, firelight, incredible, limelight, the blue, endless summer, and Nico blue. So I've got a bit of a hydrangea problem. All right, this is another thing you could just spend a long time just playing in this wet paint. It's quite hypnotic. In order to pull these vertical reflections down, we'll want to make sure the green is dry. It's easy to accidentally pull up a little edge. So let's give this give a little blast and dry it, get into the reflections and the boats. Only 2 steps left, really, the reflections and the whitening up here, and then we're into the beautiful flowers. All right, I'm just gonna rinse off some of my favorite brushes that we'll be using in the hydrangeas, and then we'll get into those reflections. You definitely need that mini fan, so if yours is sitting in its watery cup, give it a decent rinse. Tap it off on a napkin for good measure. All right, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our wonderful partner, Vanessa, who is with you in the chat while I'm painting, she makes all of our beautiful emails. We're a very small team at Keep It Colorful. It's just me, my partner, Dawn, Vanessa, our office admin, and my mom who helps edit the video. So we're very much a mom and pop business here, but Vanessa has been an invaluable part of our team. She makes such beautiful emails. She's with you in the chat, and today is her birthday. So I wanted to make sure to wish Vanessa a very happy birthday. When she's done the chat, she gets to go out for birthday dinner, and I know Dawn and I wish her all the best. All right, the fan brush. Okay, I like using my mini fan to pull these down. This one, but any short brush will do. The reason shorter brushes are good for when we want transparent layers is because they're stiffer, they really dig into the paint and can help with transparency. Remember, when we apply soft paint, even on wet paint with a soft brush, it will float on top. So having a stiffer brush can help us dig into the paint and kind of scrape it on. Another great way to help the transparency is by adding a bit of water. You can use glazing medium, but we don't need it for something this small. So I'm gonna add just a bit of water into this paint, and I'm gonna top most of it off. So for this technique, thinner paint with water and a light brush load. Okay, so you see it's not gobbed on. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to come under my boat again, but this time, okay, so the water helps the transparency, and I can just pull straight down, getting that nice reflection. So tap into the paint, dip it off on the water. If it's too strong, you can dip it in even less. I know these guys got lost a little bit. Rub it with your finger too. Oh, got a little green in there. Yeah, the nice still water has beautiful reflective properties. Everyone loves a good wave, good wavy water, but also when it's still and glass-like, it's got its own charm to it, doesn't it? All right, so you can have a few extra highlights here and there if you want them, like vertical or horizontal ones too. Just scrubbing these out with a bit of water. Okay, and now it's time to go into the white, and let's lighten these boats. Whatever brush fits into your boat is the best brush to use. And the highlights won't look so stark once we've got the highlight in the boat. I mean the water highlights, because the boats are going to be very white without water in them. And you can let little bits of that underpainting show through, or even go back into some of your light blue or purple into the white if you want a little two-tone in there. I'll often come up the very edge of the brush, just kind of in between the sail line, just to help keep it looking clean. You can use the background color too underneath the boat like this if you want to give it a bit of separation between these sails. Now let's do that on all of our boats, switching to a smaller brush, of course, for the smaller boats. And again, if you have any texture popping through, like from the hill in the distance, don't fight it. Just add more texture in the sailboat on top. So I might add a big old glob of paint into the sail like this. So it's kind of standing up and like raised texture. Okay. Then I might just spend a minute thinking if I want to add any bits of, remember where the light is coming from. It's coming from this way. So if I add some of these blue colors, I'm going to do it on the side opposite to the sun. So all the shadows will be on the right side. So maybe a little bit of some of the purpley blues in there, just if you want. But adding some of these pastel colors right into the boat, I do think it brings in all of the colors are in the hydrangeas, from the bright aqua green, all the blues are in there, and some purples, and even some pink magenta. So subtly, like in the sky, we had that purpley blue. And you can layer your white too on the side the light's coming down. On the left-hand side, I might do an extra dollop of white. You can really see it up close. Like this, like a thick. Okay, we can always add more. I might actually do a little bit of detail into this distant landmass. And I'm just using a little 1/4 inch flat brush and maybe just like a few dollops of some greens in there. Even a bit of a kind of creamy land color. Or some phthalo blue. Just have fun with it. All right, once your boats have been lightened, given that second coat, it's time to pull on these beautiful, bountiful blue balloons. So take a moment, finish your boats. You can pause this video anytime you want or need to. I'm keeping my blues nice and wet because we are going to use them for our hydrangeas. Now I primarily use a bright brush. Both of these are bright brushes of approximately the same size. So use whichever one you like. I see a comment from Trudy who says, I was watching from the beginning, but I left to go to the pool. I've never tried doing a loosey-goosey painting. I need to learn to loosen up, not trying to be perfect, realistic, and then disappointed. So when I try to paint loosely, the best tip that I can give you is stop thinking about what you're painting. Stop trying to make it look like a sailboat. Paint the light that you see. So I didn't come in here thinking about a cloud shape. I looked at a picture that had clouds and I just painted the lights and the darks and the colors that I saw to capture the shape of a cloud. Same thing with the hydrangeas. I didn't try to paint every single petal. I painted where the light was the strongest. And then kind of this halftone or midtone, I just kept dabbing it in there. I would add teal, I would add pink, I would add blue. If I didn't like it, I just kept dabbing it until I liked the color. And sometimes I would lose the shape. So even though I'm painting loose, it doesn't mean fast. It means painting kind of as little detail as you need to. So this hill has lights and darks, but if you squint your eyes, it kind of looks more finished, but up close, it's just a bunch of dabs and daubs. So as long as this is lighter and this is darker, this will look further away. And I'm not painting every little tree or hill. I'm kind of letting the viewer's eye make up their mind about what that might be. And I love painting loose because in a way it mimics vision in a beautiful way, where if you're looking at an object, like say a flower bush, your focal range for your eye, especially if you're looking at a single bloom, can be quite small. Your eye blurs a lot of stuff into the periphery. Like if I'm looking at my desk, I'm focusing on this little mushroom, everything else around me is kind of blurry and just this mess of lights and darks, okay? So as long as you paint the lights and the darks, keeping in mind where the light is, and even if you can't visualize where the light is, if you're using a photograph or a tutorial, squint your eyes, be like, it's light here, it's dark here, it's roughly circular, and then add whatever colors you see or want. And try to practice looking at the light source and using that as a technique for loosening up. we are going to paint some loose circles now. I'm going to start with this bright brush, and I want to have this look like we're in a huge hydrangea bush. Like these guys can get 6 to 8 feet tall. They can get quite big. We're looking through this, and the blooms on my blue hydrangea are this big. Some of my pinky winkies and my other hydrangeas, they can get like basketball size. Let's start with some ultramarine blue and maybe just a little bit of white. So going back to this kind of color here. And I'm going to have one that's kind of just slightly to the right of center. And I'm going to pull a big guy right here. Could mostly see the whole ball. And do either ovals or circles. So here's one, like this. And then I have another one right here. Leave a bit more green in between than you see here, because I guarantee you they will grow as you paint them in. Maybe we have one kind of peeking out over the edge, kind of like this. So I just do kind of a little V shape, and then like here it is. And then maybe one up here. Big one. They can overlap. Like this one's coming out from in behind the leaves, okay? This one too. This one's kind of going in behind both these two. Okay, so here are my circly ovals for this big hydrangea bush. And let's mix 2 more colors. Let's take a little bit of purple into some ultramarine blue. Make ourselves a real kind of periwinkle color. Add a little white to some of that. This is a real kind of purpley blue. And I also like getting in a little magenta. So magenta plus some white could be nice to have in there. So I might take a light ultramarine, and I'm going to use the corner of my brush, and I'm going to change it up all the time. So ultimately the petals on a hydrangea look a little something like this. Okay, like 4 with a dark center. But they're so full of petals that you don't have to worry about getting the exact shape, especially not in the beginning. It's more kind of like dabs. The sun is going to be stronger right here. So let's start just slowly fading from a light ultramarine to a dark ultramarine. I hold my brush like this, but I roll it so that I can use the edge or the whole fat part or this edge all the time. Just kind of let it twiddle around in my hand and roll around. Okay, maybe adding some of the purple into this lower part here. And eventually we'll get some lighter highlights, but for now, we're going to stick with this. Maybe getting a little white right at the top. Tappity tap tap. So a nice fade from the highlight color to the mid-tone color. And then you can start adding the pink. This pink has white in it, so it's kind of more of a mid-tone color, maybe getting some of that in there. And then let's do another one. Starting with the darks, adding a mid-tone on top, integrating them down. You can even add some phthalo blue into some of these and turquoise blue, but let's just get a base in here first. Add some bits of your pink or purple in there as you go. If you want to add the pink into the highlight side, you'll add some white into it. Oh, I got white and blue in this pink, so it's looking light purple, but you know what I mean. The darker pink goes into the mid-tone section. The lighter pink would go into the highlight section. So even when you're using colors, we want to keep the values correct. So mid-tone pinks go in the mid-tone area. Dark pinks, like the shadowy pink, could go in the shadow side. That way we can keep the form of the shape. Eventually, I want you to get some strong white right along that top edge in a dabbed line, but it will be kind of conjoined where the brightest highlights are. So I'm going to snuggle in close, and I want to show you the highlight along the edge. So here, it's going to be a really bright highlight, kind of joined, but in a dabbing sort of fashion along the edge. Now I want to show you something else. Okay, let's say we have a really dark area, like here, where it's all really dark blues, okay? And this looks kind of plain. We still want definition down there. So what I need you to do is look at the color and make a color that's just a little bit lighter than whatever color you have. So if this is a dark ultramarine, I need a color that's not as white as the highlight. I need a mid-tone value that's just a little bit lighter to break it up. Then we can get those really bountiful, juicy petals while keeping the values. If it's too light, you can add some other colors like your turquoise blue is nice to get in there too. It integrates some of the color of the water into the hydrangea. Just for a harmonious kind of composition. Now let's go along and finish all of these. I find I could just zone into this part of the painting and stipple away for a long time. So this is the quiet part of the painting. If I want to add some purple into the highlight part, I just lighten a small section of my purple, a kind of periwinkle color. Now I'm going to do this a bit more systematically, and I'm going to add all my shadows on in one go for the rest of these flowers. Maybe you've noticed yours growing. I know mine certainly have. This was a half flower and now it's a full flower. Nice, thick, juicy dollops of paint for me. You can wrap these around the side edges too, if you want. And I did want to mention, I don't want you to worry about bringing them in and out. Like your hydrangeas are going to get to a point where you're like, they look amazing. And then you'll want to integrate a color and then you've lost the nice highlight mid-tone shadow range when you add new color. And then you've got to bring it back. But that's how it goes with the hydrangeas, is when you add a new color or attempt, a new highlight, you do need to bring them in and out, and don't be afraid to do that. Shadows, mid-tones. I like to first do this in the ultramarine, especially for that Nico blue hydrangea that is very much these colors. And then the Endless Summer has more of the purples. Ah! I have dropped a dollop of blue in my water. Never panic. This happens to you. Just get a damp paper towel. And it's a rather large dollop I've got on here. I'm going to wipe it away and then find another clean edge and wipe off any residuals. Whew, crisis averted. Adding that nice light edge all around the top really help clean them up. And you can use pure white, or you could start with a light purple or a light pink. Keep dabbing away and feel free to start integrating some of these lovely colors in there. I've established mostly my blues first, and now I want to get some of these fuchsias, purples, even mix the purple and fuchsia together, though they'll mix right on the canvas too, okay? Now, once I've really established some of these bluey purples, I do like to integrate a few of the other colors. Again, some of this turquoise blue, or turquoise blue with some white in there. even some phthalo blue on the shadow side, and that will really darken it. In fact, if you mix phthalo blue with magenta or purple, it's going to mix a really, really dark color if you need to boost any of your shadows. And I want you to think about your shadows at this point as helping to separate your balls of flower. So this is a light edge of this flower here. So if I darken this edge, it helps pop out the flower in front of it here. And same thing here, if I darken this edge sitting against this light bit, it will help this one pop out. Darken here. At some point, we have to let our marks be more few and far between. Some of the younger buds on the blue hydrangeas are actually a really pale green color. So I like to take some of this really pale turquoise blue and even add the tiniest pinch of hooker's green into it. This is like a really pale greeny blue. I'm going to make it even more pale. Try to squeeze out some of my actual last bottle of white. Precious, my precious. I like adding a bit of this green at the tips of some of these. On that highlight edge, along with some white. A lovely way to get some of the watery color, the green from the background, all playing to create this really unified color scheme. I definitely zoned into these hydrangeas for a really long time. So I'm going to end the tutorial soon. Mostly because I am actually, after tomorrow's class, I'm getting ready to go see my grandmother, who I haven't seen in quite a few years since I moved out east. So I am really excited. But you can keep stippling away here. I'm going to snuggle in for a second. So I am pushing, I'm doing really thick dabs at this point in the painting. I want to get an angle you can see the thickness of my paint here. These are, oops, a little too close. Thick, juicy dollops. And so I lost some of this lovely kind of mid-tone ultramarine blue. So I might just tap a little bit in, kind of where we're fading from this light color to the dark. And I am picking up big dollops of paint. Once you kind of like the colors, you can get some of these big dollops on and try to get that, squint your eyes. It should look really light, and then kind of a little bit light, and then dark down below. I got some of that turquoise blue in there too from the water. And once you're feeling happy with your colors, I like pulling just a few really loosey-goosey of that light yellowy green that we have back here into some of the tips of the leaves. I am going to dry these hydrangeas a little bit one last spritz just in case we need these colors. I'm going to give this a blast. Okie dokie do. I'm going to take a number 6 bright brush into some of this warm green, Raven Hooker's green with white. I like to have a bit of warmth in the green. And let's just pull in some fun little streaky deekies here. Maybe there's a little leaf couple coming up. If you want a darker color, you can do that too. I just pull some little taps in, really subtle. If you want it even lighter, use some of that green, add a bit more yellow and some white. Hooker's green with the yellow and the white. I want them to be kind of buried in this shrub. They have a lot of flowers, really densely packed together like this. If you have a garden, even a small space, I don't think I could recommend hydrangeas enough. If there was a downside to hydrangeas, and there is really only one, that a lot of them are sterile, so they don't feed the pollinators. And I always want to have plants that feed pollinators as well. But I did find a few varieties of hydrangea, like Hydrangea Pinky Winky, that are not sterile. So they have pollen and will feed the birds and the bees. And then those are just buzzing with bees in the summertime. Now stand back, see if you want to do any little tweaky deekies. Could add a little light into the landmass below. Add any colors, like maybe we want to get some of this ultramarine blue that we have aplenty in the hydrangeas, and add a few little swabs and dabs into the background. So I just put a few little dabs in here to keep it loose. Maybe you want to lighten the ground, add shadows. It's really up to you. Squint at it, see if it looks good, see if it feels good. And sometimes even if it doesn't, and this happens to me a lot, my hubby Don will tell you, I'll be like, I hate it, it's the worst. I'm definitely not teaching this. And then I go to bed and I wake up and I'm like, oh, that's pretty. So always sleep on it, even if you're feeling some negative thoughts towards your painting. But sometimes we just get kind of sensitive to them. Like we see all the brush strokes, but we don't see it as a whole because we've been working on pulling it together. That's hard to see as a whole once we get oversensitive or sensitized to the individual strokes. So I'm stepping back. I'm standing up. I'm about 3 feet to, I'm pretty short. 3 feet's a stretch. I'm probably about 2 feet from the painting. Just adding these final highlights. And when you're done, I want you to sit back, relax, roll those shoulders. We can be hunched over when we paint. That's why I always say that. Roll those shoulders out, stretch your back backwards if you've been bending forwards for a few hours. And then you are done and you have completed your coastal hydrangea painting. Now I do have some classes coming up and I want to show you what's coming up next. We're going to do something totally different. And we are going to tomorrow we're going to paint this really cute scene of a little camper in a desert scene. This one's really fun to paint, totally different colors than today, totally different style. We're going to use a fan brush in the clouds to blend blue and orange together. So we're going to mix these complementary colors. It's really fun, keeping those saturated. And June is National Camping Month. So I thought our first painting in June has got to be something camping related. So that's what we're going to do this weekend. And then next weekend, we may only have one tutorial because I'm going to be traveling to see my grandma. But this is a painting in a series that we're working on. We started this spring with our spring bridge, which I'll pull out for you. So you can see them side by side. So spring bridge is a painting. The trees just come out. There's pink flowering shrubs. And everything's really light golden. The distant trees haven't leafed out. A few of the trees have. And then our next one is going to be the summer one where everything is full and lush and green and warm of this beautiful golden hour light. And then come autumn, maybe in August or September, we'll paint our autumn bridge. And then of course in winter, a beautiful blue one. So those are the next 2 classes that are coming up. And just to recap, so for today, you painted a coastal scene in rich, soft blues and then these periwinkle hues as well. We worked at capturing the lightness of summer by the sea, and you worked with atmospheric perspective. Practiced brush techniques for water and sky, and used layering dabs of color and shape to build these realistic and bountiful bunches of hydrangeas in the foreground. I want you to be proud of what you created today because every painting session is a step forward in building your skills and confidence. Plus, it's great time, and taking time to paint is always time well spent. Don't forget that I'll leave this tutorial up for free for 7 days, or you can tip to own your favorite classes like this one to keep for a lifetime access, and right now is 50% off, which just makes it a few dollars. It's between about $5 and $7 depending on where you live, and that will give you lifetime access to this class. If you are one of our Cake Academy subscribers, this tutorial is now in your library, so you can come back to it anytime that it's convenient for you, so you can really paint at your own pace. And if you're not a member yet, our Academy gives you unlimited access to over 560 tutorials with detailed step-by-step instruction and support for your painting journey. Now, as for this painting, I would love to see your finished piece. I'll share a link below for our private Facebook sharing group. You can join our community and we can all celebrate your progress together. That's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful day for the rest of it. I'll see some of you tomorrow for painting Camper Still Life. Take care, and until next time, I hope you keep it colorful. Bye.